This video is going to be about sectionalism in the United States leading up to the Southern secession. First, let me talk about the North. The North was more industrialized than the South, and this was due to many factors such as great ports which allowed for easy trade with Europe, rivers which provided steam power, and new technologies. Also, Alexander Hamilton encouraged industrial growth in the North, especially with the National Bank which provided loans for merchants and businessmen. There was a northern shift into the factory system. This was coupled with the massive urbanization that was happening at that time. Cities had poor sanitary conditions, and factories had horrible working conditions. There was lots of immigration into the north, especially from Germany, Britain, and Ireland. This was mostly for employment, but also specific reasons such as the potato famine and failed revolutions in Germany. Some nativists didn't like the surge in immigration because it was, quote unquote, taking up jobs. Now let me talk about the South. The South relied on the production of cotton. This especially sparked up in the late 18th century when Great Britain had a burning desire for cotton that the South fulfilled. This need for production would lead to the need for workers, which would eventually lead to the ingrainment of slavery into the everyday lives of Southerners. Southern slavery was horrible, and laws allowed owners essentially free rein over their slaves. There were resistances against this cruel practice, for example, the Underground Railroad led by Harriet Tubman. Many slaves tried to run away to Canada, where slavery was outlawed in the 1830s. There was a split in the Union due to slavery. The North and South would slowly turn against each other due to the topic of slavery, and due to some economic reasons, but slavery is the one I'm going to focus on right now. This would eventually lead to the Southern secession and the Civil War. The topic of slavery would become so big that the two political parties would be defined over their policies on slavery. And the big topic within slavery was free states and slave states. If there was an upset and balance between the two, it could lead to one side threatening severe actions over the other. For example, secession. Now, there were many actions taken to try and glue together the split between the Union. Many forms of compromises were created that tried to appease both the North and the South so as to not create an all-out civil war. First, the Compromise of 1820, otherwise known as the Missouri Compromise. The North didn't want Missouri to be admitted as a slave state since it could upset the balance between slave states and free states. So Henry Clay came up with this compromise where Missouri is admitted as a slave state, but Maine is admitted as a free state. And also, slavery is prohibited in territories north of the 3630 parallel. Then we had the Compromise of 1850 after the Mexican-American War. California wanted to be admitted as a free state, but that would allow the North a majority in the legislative branch. Clay proposed the Compromise of 1850, where California is admitted as a free state, but the rest of the land gained from the Mexican-American War would vote on whether they want to be a slave or a free state. Also, the Compromise of 1850 established the Fugitive Slave Act, where any escaped slave, even in free states, had to be sent back to their masters in the South. And there were some things that ultimately broke the Union. First was the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which stated that Kansas and Nebraska would be able to vote on if they were a slave state or a free state. This obviously attracted a lot of people from the opposite sides to vote, and it ultimately caused warfare known as Bloody Kansas. Another thing that broke the Union was the Dred Scott decision of 1857, where the Supreme Court ultimately stated that slaves were the property of the slave owners and that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. This obviously infuriated the Northern abolitionists. And the final thing that broke the Union was Lincoln becoming president in 1860. The Southerners saw him as the sole guy that would take away all of their slaves and ruin their livelihood. Shortly after he became president, the South started to secede from the Union.